Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're diving into a truly fascinating theological breakdown of human creation. We're going to trace our incredible journey, moving all the way from simple physical dust right up to the heights of spiritual perfection. And we're going to look at all of this through the lens of the divine name Rab, which translates to the sustainer, the educator, or the one who takes something from a very basic state and gradually nurtures it all the way to absolute perfection. Listen to how beautifully this 18th century poet, Sheikh Ghalib, captures our core thesis today. The idea here is that the human being isn't just some random inhabitant floating in space. We are the absolute masterpiece. We are the concentrated essence of the entire universe. Think about it like this. If you were to squeeze the cosmos down to extract its pure essence, you'd get a human. And if you expanded a human, you'd get the cosmos. You are, quite literally, the pupil of the eye of creation. So here is our roadmap for tracing this remarkable journey today. We'll start with the essence of the universe, move into the stages of elemental creation, then explore the massive shift from mortal flesh to human, talk about the breath of the soul, and finally wrap up with revelation as divine nurture. Okay, section 1, the essence of the universe, humanity as the microcosm. We have to begin by framing humanity not as this tiny, insignificant speck in a vast, cold universe, but as the microcosm that contains the very seed and fruit of all creation. The crucial point here is that humans are created in what the Quran calls ahsan-i taqweem, which means the absolute best of molds, or perfect proportion. But here is the catch, and it's a big one. This perfect mold isn't the finish line. It's actually the starting line. Humanity is placed at this starting point, fully equipped, and we're expected to use our intellect and our free will to achieve our ultimate intended spiritual form. We've got the potential, but we still have to run the race. And this brings up a brilliant illustration of divine nurturing. Remember how we called humanity the pupil of the eye of creation? Well, think about your physical eye for a second. It has a deep bone socket, eyelids to instinctively shield from immediate threats, a brow ridge to absorb impacts, and even eyebrows to divert salty sweat away. Just as the Creator engineered these incredibly meticulous physical defenses for the eye, the pupil of the body, He spiritually protects humanity, the pupil of the universe, from self-destruction. The Creator doesn't just create, He actively protects what He creates. Moving right along to section 2, stages of elemental creation, tracing our material roots. Let's break down the incredible physical journey we took before we ever became conscious beings. The etymology here is just mind-blowing. The name Adam, or Adam, literally stems from the meaning of red earth, or topsoil, and Hava, or Eve, is rooted in the meaning of life, or the living essence, because when you combine these two ancient concepts, you literally get living earth. It's not just an old story, it is the exact biological formula for human existence. Body plus life force. The source material points out that the Quran outlines this very specific elemental timeline of human creation. We start from simple dust, or earth. Then water is added to make clay. Then it becomes a molded, concentrated mud where organic life can actually start to brew. And finally, it becomes baked or dried clay. It brilliantly incorporates the 4 classical elements, earth, water, fire through that baking process, and air, right into our physical makeup. Every element of the physical universe was harnessed to build our physical form. And the crazy thing is, we still carry that universe within us today. We have practically all the Earth's natural elements in our bodies: iron, zinc, copper. Our most primal brain structure, the brainstem, resembles a plant bulb and handles our basic vegetative functions. And of course, our biological life force represents the animal kingdom. This means that when a person stands in prayer, their bones represent the mountains, their biological functions represent the animals, and their brainstem represents the plants. You are quite literally presenting the entire universe in microcosm to the Creator. Let's jump to section 3, from mortal flesh to human, the great conceptual shift. Having minerals and biology is amazing, sure, but it doesn't make us human. The source material introduces a really profound theological difference between 2 words that often just get translated as man. The first is beshar. Before we were the civilized, conscious human, our ancestors were beshar, a biological creature that lived on Earth, made of that living clay we just talked about, acting entirely on primal animalistic instincts. It was a biological, mortal entity with a body and a life force, but completely lacking a divine soul. So notice the turning point here. You have the bashar, which is purely primal and biological, sharing its traits completely with the animal kingdom. And then you have the insan, the human. What is the fundamental difference? It was the injection of a third element, the soul. It was this divine breath that elevated us from mere biological entities just trying to survive into true, conscious, civilized humans. Which brings us to Section 4, the breath of the soul, awakening the vicegerent. This transition leads us directly into the defining moment of our existence, the very moment the divine soul was breathed into our biological framework. Now, there's a famous theological mystery found in the Quran. When God announces he is going to place a human on earth, the angels immediately ask, "Will you place upon it one who causes corruption and sheds blood?" Why on earth did they assume that? Were they psychic? Did they somehow know the future? Well, the answer provided in the source is strikingly logical. The angels weren't predicting the future at all. They were simply observing the past. They had already witnessed the violent, wild track record of our biological ancestors, the Bashar, living on Earth purely on animal survival instincts. They saw creatures that shed blood just to survive. What they hadn't seen yet was what the introduction of a divine soul would do to this creature. With the breathing of the soul, humanity was given a brand new title, the Halif, meaning vicegerent or deputy. The source interestingly links this to the word Khalfa, kind of like a master builder on a construction site. Humanity was appointed to be the master builder, tasked with taking the raw materials of Earth and turning them into a beautiful, civilized construction. We were no longer just living on the Earth, we were tasked with nurturing it. So the crucial point is that when the angels were commanded to bow to the human, they absolutely weren't bowing to the physical clay or the primal biology. They bowed because the soul within the human is the absolute highest manifestation of the divine name, Rabb, the sustainer, the educator. It was a profound recognition of that divine nurture, that rububiyya, that transformed simple mud into a conscious, responsible masterpiece capable of building civilizations. And that leads us to our final part, Section 5, Revelation as Divine Nurture, the ultimate education. Because this process of divine education, it doesn't just stop. It continues right up to this day through revelation. The source points out an incredible parallel here. In several verses, the Quran actually refers to revelation itself as a soul, or ruh, brought down by the angels. Just as a soul is needed to bring a biological body to life and make it truly human, divine revelation is sent down as a spiritual soul to bring human consciousness to life. It comes down to this. Every single part of us needs its proper food. The physical body requires physical elements, like earth, water, and minerals, to achieve biological survival. But your divine soul is not physical. It cannot be fed by dirt and water. The divine soul requires divine revelation to achieve its ultimate spiritual perfection. It desperately needs the continued education of the Rab. Because the very definition of the name Rab is to take something from a raw, simple state and elevate it step by step to its ultimate perfection. The source argues that turning your back on revelation is a profound tragedy. Rejecting this guidance is literally refusing to grow. It's saying no to the ultimate education and nurturing intended by your Creator. And ultimately, it just leaves the soul starved. I want to leave you with this final thought to ponder as we wrap up this explainer. Think back to the very beginning of our journey today. If the Creator went out of his way to design such perfect, complex physical defenses, the deep bone socket, the quick eyelids, the eyebrows, just to protect your physical eyes from a tiny speck of dust, shouldn't we be endlessly curious about the spiritual protections and guidance he has offered to protect our eternal souls? If we value the physical protections of our body that much, it only makes sense to seek out the spiritual education meant for our highest self. Thanks so much for joining me on this incredible journey today.